Hey, it's Vanessa from CraftyGemini.com, and today we're ready to start on our first sewing project. As a beginning sewer, you want to make sure you're starting off with very simple projects. Do not try to tackle very challenging projects like prom dresses or Halloween costumes, okay? I recommend you start off simple. You have to take baby steps. So, we're ready to start. This is the project that we'll be making today. I call it an eye pillow, okay? They're little packs that are filled with flaxseed, or you can fill them up with rice. And I also add in some essential herbs like lavender or spearmint for a nice refreshing smell, and it's also relaxing on your eyes. As you can see here, this one is pieced. This is what in the quilting world is called a pieced front. This means that the one piece that goes across the front is made up of smaller pieces of other different kinds of fabrics. Okay. Now let's go over the kinds of fabrics that we'll be needing in order to complete our project. The front, remember I said it was a pieced front, okay? All of these fabrics here are 100% cotton fabrics, or what quilters call calicos. So in any one of your hobby shops or fabric stores, you'll be able to find them. They come in all different prints. I have some samples here, okay? And that's what's going to make up the front of your eye pillow. Now the back of it is a silkier, softer fabric. You can either use silk, a silk charmeuse, anything silky that you can find in the fabric department. Here I have a sample of the same blue. You see it has a sheen to it and it lies very soft on your skin. So this will be perfect for this eye pillow. So our next step is to cut the fabric that we'll need to make the front of our eye pillow. As you can see, the sample I have here is a little bit more complex and has a lot of other different fabrics and sizes. We'll be keeping this project a little bit simpler, and we're basically going to make it up of 3 vertical strips using these 3 different fabrics. So just so you have an idea, it's going to look a little something like that. Now let's cut our pieces. Now we're ready to cut our actual strips. So you can see here your instructions are to cut 3 strips measuring 1.5 by 10 inches. That means I'll be cutting that strip of 1.5 inches by 10 inches from each one of these 3 different colors to then put them together, and that'll make the front of our eye pillow. So let's cut our first one. We'll start with the purple. This is another cutting technique. As you can see on my ruler, where the 1 and the 1 meets, this one corner on your ruler, I mark it with some nail polish so that I remind myself of where that corner is. What you want to do is line up this corner block to your bottom right hand corner if you are right-handed. The way this works is that here's my 0 point basically, and from here to here I know it's 1.5 inches, which is exactly what I need. So if I'm right-handed, I can now cut along this line without having to use another ruler or to move any of my fabric pieces, because when I cut off the excess fabric, I know I'll be left with the exact 1.5 inch strip that I need. So now I want to cut my 1.5 inch strip, but as you can see, I have a problem. My ruler only measures 9.5 inches and my strip is obviously longer. So I have no ruler up here. What I like to do is to fold the fabric in half along the edge that you'll be cutting. And if you cut it doubled up like that, it's still not going to make a difference. It's going to work out just fine. So first steps first is to straighten off my edge. I see a few little of the fibers of the thread unraveling, and I want to make sure I have a clean edge. So I'm just going to cut a little bit off. Remember, keep your hand on the ruler, then remove the excess. Now I have a clean edge. Turn it over so I can do the same thing with the other edge. And now I have both those sides that are clean. What you want to do next is, now I know I need to cut the 1.5 inch strip. So again, with my 1 corner block to my right hand side, I'll line up this straight edge on the 1.5 mark. Remember, here's your 0, so I know from here to here is the distance that I need. I want to make sure that I'm lining up the edge with the same half marks all the way up to the top. There's my 1.5 inches. I'll hold it down with my hand. Remove the excess, and now I have the 1.5. With our 1.5 inch width already cut, the next step is to cut the 10 inch length that you need. Obviously this is more than 10 inches. So again, my ruler is only 9.5. So you have 2 things here. You can either eyeball or measure another 1/2 inch and just add it on like that, or again, you can measure in half. So if I fold this in half, half of 10 is 5, right? So if I measure, I put this folded edge here on the 5. Remember to have your folded edge in towards your ruler, because you don't want to cut your folded edge. What that's going to give you is 2 individual pieces. You want one continuous strip. So we'll be cutting on the separated edges here, okay? So if I put my ruler on the 5 at the fold, and I go back down here, remember keeping that 1 corner to my right, that means from this 0 point to this 5 is 5 inches. But since it's folded, that's going to be 10. That's exactly where I need it. Hold the ruler down, remove the excess, and there's my first 1.5 inch by 10 inch strip. My next step is to cut my 1.5 inch by 10 inch strip out of my pink fabric. So you can see here I have a random piece of rectangular fabric, and if you see this white edge here, this is not part of the fabric, okay? This is what we call the selvage. This is the edge that comes with the fabric based on how they manufacture it and make it. So what you want to do before you start any project is to cut that off. So that's what we'll be doing. I'm just going to line it up briefly right before the white edge starts so I can have a straight clean edge. I still have a little bit more. Okay. Now again, you see that fabric is offset here. We're going to flip it over and square that up. Now we're ready to cut our 1.5 inch width. Again, locating the 1 to 1 corner, I'm now going to place it on the edge and cut my 1.5. Remember, always double check before you cut because you don't want to ruin a project, especially as a beginner. So check. I have my ruler down. This is where I think I should be cutting. To double check myself, I'll see from the 0 point to where the edge of the fabric is under my ruler is 1.5. It's correct all the way up. I know that after I cut and remove this excess fabric, that's exactly what I'll have left. So I have my 1.5 inch. Next is to cut the 10 inch length of it. Remember, we have the same problem here. I only have a 9.5 inch ruler, so I'm going to double it up and do the same thing I did with my purple strip. The folded edge, remember we want the open one to the outside, that's what we want to cut, and we want to keep that fold, so we end up with one continuous piece. The 1 to 1 corner to my bottom right, line up the folded side of the fabric with my 5, cut. I know from here to here is 5, doubled up, like we have here, is 10. There's my second strip. Like you saw in the last strip, there was a white piece of fabric basically running along the edge, and I said that that's the selvage. You want to make sure that you look at the fabric, and depending on which kind of fabric you're buying, you'll see that they're different widths. The one in the previous piece I cut was very thin. It was narrow, something like this. As you can see, the selvage on this fabric I'm going to be cutting is a lot thicker than that. So in this case, you don't want to cut off that edge with it face down since you won't be able to see exactly what you'll be cutting. So what I like to do here is have it this way and make sure that I see exactly that I'm getting all of that selvage edge. I don't want that in my project, okay? So I have one straight edge, flip it. And if you're just going to be cutting one strip, I can do it like this. This straight edge I just cut, I line it up with my 1.5. Remember, make sure you have that 1 to your bottom right if you're right-handed. Do the opposite if you're lefty. There's my 1.5. Cut my strip, and I have the 1.5 width. Now let's cut the length, 10 inches. Again, it's super long, and my ruler doesn't reach all that. So I'm going to double it. Remember the folded edge, again, to the inside. You don't want to cut your fold. Line it up with my 5. And there's my 10 inches. Here we have the 3 1.5 inch by 10 inch strips that we'll be using for our project. So the first step in the creative process was to figure out which fabrics we wanted to choose to make our project. So I chose these 3 coordinating fabrics. The next step before you start sewing is to figure out which way you want to place your fabrics. This one I got a good shot of a seahorse here, so I think I want to put it in the center. And I'm going to have the pink on this side and the purple on the left side. And that's how I'm going to sew my project together. So let's start sewing.